Guys, come on in, come on in. Happy Sunday night, special edition. I think we're going to get a lot busier here leading up to the election because a couple things are going on at the same time, right? School is starting back. Nonsense is starting back. School board meetings are starting back. So I've got a very special guest tonight. Laura Blackwell, you've been in the news lately. You actually told people clear the, you're in Cabarrus County, by the way, Cabarrus County School Board. You're on the school board. You told people, hey, clear the room. We've got some real facts here to talk about. And I think you read part of a book. What happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was made aware of a book that was initially I was made aware by Sean Turner, who is also running for Cabarrus County School Board, of a book that had been read out loud by a parent at CMS. And he sent the video to me because I chair something called the Literature and Supplemental Material Committee that was put together, I would say, a few months ago by our chair, Holly Grimsley. And so he sent this to me because he was concerned that with them reading it at the CMS board, that potentially it could be something that we needed to look at as well. So once he sent that to me, I watched it and was absolutely appalled. And I said, okay, let me check out Destiny, which is kind of our media source to be able to find out what books are where within our school system.
Let me just jump right in. So Destiny, as I understand, it's an online platform that's shared throughout Cabarrus County. I believe even Mecklenburg County shares it. But guys, just so you know, a third grader can go on to Destiny, right? And it's an online platform to access books. It's more than the card system, right? It's a full digital access. Is that correct?
Right, meaning that we can pull up all of the books and what libraries they exist in our school system. So that is one of the things that everyone has said. I needed to pull up Destiny to find out if that particular book was in any of our schools. At that point, Sean said, actually, I've already pulled that up, and these are the schools that it's in.
What's the book?
So it's called Looking for Alaska. It's a book by John Green. I had honestly never heard of this book before. And just listening to the mom that read the book out loud, and the graphic nature of what was in the book itself, I was appalled. So immediately sent that to our superintendent, our board chair, and our board attorney. And I said, okay, here is this book that has been brought to my attention. We have this Literature and Supplemental Material Committee. We have come up with 2 policies that are now, I believe at that time they were before the board. So we had already submitted those to our policy review committee. And then the board was actually looking at those policies. I had been a little concerned by other emails that I had gotten about some potential gaps that we had with the process. And so we were going to use that book as our first kind of test for the new process, because I thought this is going to be a great example of a book that should probably be reviewed, and let's see how this process works. One of the problems that we ran into was that the form that the committee initially wanted us to use did not have the option to be anonymous. And so I had issue with trying to find somebody that would even submit a form. And we had not even started school back at this point. So this was even before school started. So we didn't have our committees together at each individual school. We were still kind of working out the process of how all this was going to work. And here we have this example, this book that's ready in our, has fallen in our laps to use as an example. And we realized that there's still some gaps in the process. And so
Tanya,
sorry about that. Go ahead.
You're good. Oh, sorry. Hold on. My nose itches. Can you edit that out? You
Yes.
there?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, got it.
Okay, sorry. So going through that process, we talking to Dr. Kapicki, I was so I was so appalled by just that particular part of the book. I had not at that point read the whole book.
So tell me, so this is a book, you guys. So there's a lot of books, right? We've all heard of gender queer. We've been talking about this. These are books that are offered in the library. And so what you're going to hear from librarians and other folks, not all librarians, in fact, not even most, but you're going to hear from some who are activists that are going to say, well, I mean, we're not providing anything to them, but we don't want to ban books. We want to have complete access, right? And so that's what you're going to hear. So Laura's going to tell us in a second what was actually in that book. And so when you hear people say, oh, you're banning books, et cetera, we don't ban books, we're intellectuals here, say, great. I would like to have several copies of the Bible available, several copies of the Torah available, and then this book. And every book that's written by our former president, Donald Trump. Let's don't sit there and say, oh, we're not banning books. We're not banning books. Do not play into the narrative. Say, great, I agree. And I'll raise you one. Why don't we have Bible, the Torah, books by Donald Trump, books by Donald Trump Jr., books by Dinesh D'Souza, books by Clarence Thomas. We need to have, you guys, an alternate book list, right? Because I think that's going to get around this. And then let's put our money where our mouth is. But you did something that I've never seen a board member actually do. You actually, instead of being the parent that steps up to the mic, right, and has to get shushed because of total filth, you cleared the room and said, check this out. And you read this book. What is this book about?
Well, the full story of the book is definitely not about what I read out loud. This is supposed to be a coming of age kind of story, and it's about a girl who ultimately dies in the book, and the author, whether or not being a good author is the case, the bottom line is that I don't need to read the entire book to realize that there's information in this book that has no educational suitability for our children. Truly. I mean, the vulgarness of what it's talking about in this book, which, just for your viewers to kind of get an idea, I mean, they were literally talking about an oral sex scene. And having to read that out loud in a board meeting, we certainly wanted to make sure that our board interns were removed from the room, just because I thought that, that would probably be the most appropriate thing to do. And the board chair had them removed from the room just because it's not appropriate in my eyes, as well as most of the board's eyes, in order for children to read that. But the fact of the matter is that book has been readily available in our library for probably many years. I mean, that book was written in 2005. And so I wasn't aware of this book. I'm sure there's other books out there that I am not aware of that are in the library. I've certainly become quite a bit more aware of literature that is in our library system now. But I definitely was uncomfortable having to read this, but I felt like it was necessary to read this, because I think that some people who say we don't need to ban books are not truly understanding the content of what we're speaking of when we say this book is inappropriate. It doesn't have just an F word, in a couple of pages. I mean, we're literally talking about sexual content to young children, to people under the age of 18.
Right.
To me, that's an issue.
Was a huge issue. And so look, folks are obviously, there's human nature kicks in when anybody hears about the things that you read, when anybody sees these graphic photos. And so I want everybody out there to realize that these blowhards, these far left nut jobs that would have you believe that what we're doing is anti-intellectual and banning books, etc. Don't take the bait. Anytime you hear book ban, do not fall in the trap to have to defend it. Say, look, this is objectionable two ways, two things. First of all, it's not age appropriate. And secondly, I don't want my taxpayer dollars paying for that. So, I mean, those are the two things. And then every time they say book ban, just keep repeating it because you're talking to a 2-year-old. Anybody that is going to say that this should be in the schools, Laura, they're not participating in a good faith discussion whatsoever. And you need to treat it like such. It's high time we start treating these people as the infantile people that they are. And so, another thing too is, look, say, we can agree to disagree, nut jobs, and then bring a book list of your own, right? I would like to see these 20 books here. I'll settle for 19 of them, but 20 is what I'm presenting, and then have them be great books. I mean, Dinesh D'Souza has written a number of books for young readers. It's fantastic. Rush Limbaugh had a great series out. These are the books that we need to counter. So guys, instead of, wringing our hands and raising hell, which is still, important stuff to raise hell, but we need to fight fire with fire. What do you think about that idea? And then all of our folks that are running for school board, is that something that our conservative school board members can do once they get on the board to say, look, we're going to put these books in here right away?
Well, I definitely think that we are wanting to make sure that our library system has an array of different books in it. One of the things that I've heard is that many of the media specialists, when they order these books, they look at the ratings that it has on Amazon, or they look at the awards that the book has been given by different organizations. But the difference is that these organizations that give these awards, I don't know what their values are. I don't know what they're judging that based on. I also have heard specifically from media specialists that when they order these books multiple times, they don't read the entire book either. So basically what they're doing is going based on Amazon or some other system telling you that this book is good, this book is okay, like it gets all kinds of awards. And that's just not, in my opinion, a good way to judge a book to determine whether or not it's educationally suitable for children.
This looks like a good one, and it looks to me like it's gotten pretty doggone good ratings. It's very historical. I mean, Dinesh D'Souza is an intellectual. I mean, I'm just pulling him out of, the air here because he's just one that comes to mind. But look, you bring up a great point. If it's, let's figure out the measuring stick, if you will, and the litmus test. Let's figure out what that is, and then let's meet it. In other words, saying, listen, the Bible has these kind of ratings. We know it's literary. It's influenced Salman Rushdie to whoever else, whether they are reacting against it or not. It seems to be a pivotal piece of literature. Let's look it up.
That's right. And I definitely think that is a valuable and valid argument regarding these books. I've heard this argument as well, that because I don't have an educational background, because I don't have a degree in library science or whatever masters I might not have, and I just find that to be so much deflection away from what the true issue is. I don't need to have a degree. I don't need to have a master's to tell me that something is not appropriate for a child to read. The book might be a great book if you're 18 or older. And we certainly in the library for schools, the other argument is they see this stuff anyway. They can get it anywhere. Well, great. If they can get it anywhere, then it doesn't need to be in our library.
No. And what they're doing is they're trying to prime children to be sexual beings. They're trying to prime children to take advantage of them. That's why they do this. They're robbing them of their innocence. We know that. We know that they're sexualizing the children. We know it. We know that they're racializing them. We know it. We know that they're doing this, and they're really a pariah on our children's innocence. I'm going to say this again and again and again. This isn't all teachers and librarians. It's not even most teachers and librarians. It's not even some. It is a tiny minority of loudmouths. Look, anyone who's going to sit here and say, with their ascot flapping in the wind, I'm a librarian and only I can listen. You might want to check the reading scores, right? The only saving grace out of all this is that the reading scores are abysmal, and it's doubtful that kids can actually read this crap. But that's something also that's a good comeback. But anyone that's going to put themselves over the taxpayer, etc., guys, that should be pointed out over and over and over again. You should tell all the voters that, hey, listen, this lady running the library up here, she thinks she's better than the people paying her salary.
Well, and I will say this to your point, absolutely. Most teachers and most media specialists that I have contact with are wonderful people. And truly, I have several on my committee who also want to help come up with a solution and a plan in order to create a safe environment for our kids. And so I definitely think that a lot of our teachers and a lot of our media specialists are getting a bad rap. We can't blame this solely on one person or one entity. This has been going on for years. And so to literally try to just put blame on one person is insane to me. I've said it multiple times. I'm like, if you guys need to blame somebody for this, I will take the extreme ownership. You can blame me. I'm on the school board. I know that these books were there before I even got there, but if you feel like you need to blame somebody, I'm happy to take that blame. But what I am doing is taking extreme ownership of an issue and a situation that was brought to me. And that is what my goal is on this school board, is to make sure that if you bring me an issue, I am going to work to create a solution. And I will work with multiple people in order to do that. But at the end of the day, my one and only job is to make sure that we keep our kids safe. And safety to me, we have an app that we talk about very often called See Something, Say Something. And so it has to do with physical safety. But to me, it's a see something, say something for anything that has to do for safety for my kid, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. This is a safety issue, in my opinion. I believe that it is our job to make sure that we are creating a safe environment for all children.
Well, absolutely. I mean, modeling, education happens and learning happens when you study learning psychology. It happens through modeling, right? So we put an environment, we create a learning environment, which connotes a sort of expectation of the students, if you will, right? When you put in the classics, for instance, and things that are, higher reading, let's just say, than these picture books, it speaks that there's going to be an expectation for learning. So the learning environment is very important, and anyone that tells you it's not is deluding themselves. So when you have some of these libraries, I'll tell you guys, has upwards of 30 books like this and a couple of copies. And this week, during book ban week, or whatever they're calling it now, they're prominently displaying these books. When you do that, it creates an environment, to your point, that isn't safe. Look, a lot of kids, most kids, are not comfortable 6th, 7th, 8th grade seeing this kind of graphic stuff and being confronted with it right in front of their very eyes. They're not. It's unwelcoming. So this is also a welcoming of families. I'm having conversations with school board members, people who are running all over the state, and they're saying, look, this type of material and presenting it this way and accepting it, it is not a welcoming environment for families who are uncomfortable with pornography. It's not a welcoming environment for students who are uncomfortable with pornography. And of course, that's most students, right? So they always talk about, we have to have these books here, Laura, because it's welcoming, right? We have to welcome all students. Well, I'm sorry, but whether they believe it or not, pornography is unwelcoming, especially when it's in a school setting. So it's they who are being unwelcoming.
Exactly. And to that same point, when we talk about book banning, you know, like you said, everybody wants to talk about banning books, right? Here we go again, talking about banning books. When you look at the books from years ago that they talked about banning, let's just say, and you talk about Grapes of Wrath or Tom Sawyer, anything like that, when you look progressively though at how the content has changed over these years. And so when you say, here we go again, talking about banning books, I'm not talking about Grapes of Wrath and Tom Sawyer. I am talking about books that literally have oral sex scenes that are in those books. If you had talked about those back then, there's absolutely no way that would have been okay. You know, romance in books is one thing. I often liken it to books that I used to read where, you know, maybe they would hold hands or kiss. And, you know, of course, all the kids would be like, oh, there they go, get a kiss or whatever. And now we're literally talking about having oral sex. I mean, that's how progressive we have become. And in my mind, that is not the kind of progressive of a culture that I want to see in our school system.
No, this isn't the America that we have known, and the left is responsible for that. It is, people say, oh, it's not a right or a left issue. Yeah, it is a left issue, because when you do look at the NCAE, and they call themselves the teachers union, they're pushing this stuff. Actually, they're pushing their members to push this. Now, the several radical teachers that you do have there, and I know who they are because they've come after us, and they don't like the fact that we don't like the grooming agenda. They're NCAE loudmouths, and when you come at them and you present facts, oh, you're harming me, you're harming me. Again, I think it's only a handful of people, but I have to disagree with you on this. You know, there is an organization that you can blame and that's responsible for a lot of this, and it's the NCAE, because they're the thrust behind it. I know, because I've seen the tweets over the last couple of weeks, basically egging on teachers who ordinarily wouldn't probably do this stuff, egging them on to present this stuff and really put the thumb in the eye of the parent, the taxpayer, other teachers who have to be in this environment, and ultimately the children.
Which is extremely sad. And when you talk about the NCAE, what we should really be looking at and concentrating on is the North Carolina Standard of Study, right? How does this fit within the North Carolina Standard of Study? We're a school system. We're not a public library. We are a school system. We are there to educate our children. And, you know, as far as the learning loss that we've had since COVID, I can't think of, you know, how these particular books are going to be vital to the education of my child when, you know, English, math, scores, need science. I mean, these are all things that we need to truly be focusing on. But I also hear this same argument that, oh, you guys are just wasting your time talking about all of this. Well, I don't feel like we're wasting our time. I truly believe that this is an issue. This has probably been an issue for a lot longer than a lot of people want to admit with some of these materials in the system. And if we do not do something now, what does the future hold for us? What kind of books will we be talking about, you know, 10 or 15 years from now if we don't talk about this now?
Well, you're right. Now, this is a story that I wrote yesterday, and it's about a Pitt County school. It's not unlike any other school, to be honest with you, with what's going on. This is a principal who flouted going to a 4-hour course with an assistant principal and a guidance counselor at an elementary school on how to sexualize children, what their pronouns should be, how to talk about sexuality. Check this out. She's been there for 11 years, apparently. She went from getting a C at the school, 61, to having a D. And by the way, Black students are getting an F in math and reading. Black students have an overall F, while white students have a B. And it's 50% Black students. This is the bull crap they want to bring in here. This circle right there, that is the transgender flag. And then, by the way, this is a perfect example. You complain about this outrageous behavior, and you get, I'm the victim. I'm trying to make a welcoming community for all families so they can access an education. Guess what, lady? Gay parents want their kids to read too. Guess what, lady? If you're trying to make this a welcoming community for all students, so they can access an education, why not virtue signal you talking to members of the Black community on your off time to get input on how to make the school better for families that are clearly struggling? So it's the same thing. It's let's focus on this transgender agenda while our kids can't read. And now that the ebb of Black Lives Matter has waned and CRT has waned, just like with Black Lives Matter, Laura, on the end of it, on the back end of this movement for civil rights for people of color, we find out it's all about the transgender. It's all about this nonsense, which, by the way, gays don't want it. Transgender adults don't want it. They're not pushing it.
Yeah, and I definitely think that a lot of the African-American communities and the marginalized communities have been the ones that have suffered most as far as the learning loss. And unfortunately, that was a lot of what I was afraid of when we were having these discussions about whether or not to be virtual for school. And so we're seeing all of these numbers now. And to your point, yes, those are the things that we need to be focused on. We need to be going to meet with these African-American families and children to find out what it is that we need to do in order to help them, gain back some of that learning loss, and what do we need to do moving forward in order to help them retain that information. These other books are
I know what it ain't. I know what it ain't. It's not the thing that was circled. It's not the book that you read. I can guarantee you go up to 100 families that are, let's say, anybody that has kids making C or below, and you say, okay, I'm going to give you a list of 5 things, and I want you to circle the 4 that would be best. Not a damn person's going to circle that. I don't care if they're gay or not.
Right. And that's a lot of what I've been hearing too, is that, the people that have been yelling so loud about making sure that we have, transgender books or LGBTQ plus books, more than anything, they want their children to be educated. And if they're not feeling that they're getting the education that they truly need, then this is more of a social agenda than it is an educational agenda. And so as soon as we start to realize that and start to push back on that specific social agenda, that, again, I'm not saying that is coming from every person that is ordering library books. I do think that a lot of media specialists want to make sure that they have books in their library that their kids are going to be interested in reading, because they do want them to read, but we also have to focus on what they're reading. It's not just, oh, we want our children to read. Yes, we want them to read, but we also need to make sure we're doing our due diligence as adults, because we are the adult here, to make sure that we have material that has content that is appropriate for that age group. If their parents want to go to Amazon or take them to the public library to check out some of these entertaining books, I say that in quotes, entertaining books that they want them to have access to, we are not in control of that. You know, I hear, again, people say all the time, well, they can see this, they get access to this anyway. Again,
Good.
okay, then you don't need it in the library of the school system. If they have access to it anywhere, we don't need to be the ones to provide it. We have goals. We have certain things that we are required for these kids to be able to learn. And right now, I feel like the focus has now left in a lot of cases that piece of it, and we're truly having all of these arguments about social issues that really do not have any place in our school system.
No,
That's
they don't.
where they
They don't. And it's what's interesting is that we reported on a lot of stuff: critical race theory, social emotional learning, lots of stuff. Nothing, I mean, nothing has touched off a firestorm with school psychologists and teachers. Again, tiny minority. They come out like flying monkeys when we talk about this, when we cover this, when we address this. In fact, there were a couple of teachers from Cabarrus County and they were males, who spent their day when they should be teaching school one day, blowing us up on Facebook, going back and forth. I mean, they were hot about the fact that we openly rejected the idea of grooming, and we explained in depth what it is, the behaviors that it is. We explained that it rarely happened. And we also put our money where our mouth was when it comes to facts out there. There have been over 3 dozen teachers who have been arrested, not accused, but arrested and charged with sexual molestation of their students. In a lot of cases, multiple students. I mean, there's hundreds of victims. So do all teachers do it? No. Do a tiny fraction of them do it? Apparently, because there's a lot of victims. That's the way that it works, is you become a victim when you're a child, when you are groomed. So we cannot sit here and say, oh, it doesn't happen. Well, it damn sure does happen. It's happened in your county as well.
Well, and I will tell you, I have talked to a lot of people, and there is a young lady that I had talked to this past week who told me an incredibly sad story regarding her experience with reading a book that had sexual content in it, and while she was in school, and she had been being sexually abused during her childhood. And so what happened is because this book specifically had sexual content in it, it made her feel like that this must be okay, this must be how things are. And she didn't talk about it for years because of that specific book that made her feel as though maybe for some reason this is normal behavior, and who am I going to report this to if this is the kind of thing that is happening in our society? And this was when she was like 12 years old. So
I mean, they break down boundaries. I mean, that's the taking away of innocence. They're presenting material there because they're breaking down the boundaries. Period. In a discussion. I don't care what anyone says. These are the facts. Why do you break down boundaries with children that you don't know? Why do you break down boundaries with other people's children? Why do you do this when there's compulsory schooling? In other words, it's mandatory for you to be. And look, they're preying on children who cannot afford to get out of the system. Because I explain it this way. Public school is sort of like, in a lot of places, not Cabarrus County, for instance, but in a lot of places, it's sort of like if you get busted for a crime. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you. It'll be a government lawyer. That's kind of the way that schools are. So in other words, you've got kids trapped in this system. In a lot of cases, they cannot get out. They got a single parent foster kid, like I was growing up in Charlotte. What's going to happen? What's going on? They're trapped. So to your point, they're trapped. They may have stuff going on at home. They're having their boundaries eroded. And this is a human rights abuse on a massive scale, perpetrated right under our nose in our backyards with taxpayer dollars.
And when you talk about people have often talked about the decline in morality in our society. In my opinion, there is nothing more that would be adding to the decline in morality than exposing our children to sexual content that is not appropriate at that age. I mean, they don't have the same experiences that we have as an adult to be able to discern whether or not this material is, you know, the norm or not. These are situations where, you know, these kids are they're so innocent, but we are creating them in such a way that now they've lost their innocence because they've been exposed to adult material. And now we have a bunch of kids that don't know how to behave in some cases because we are treating them as though they're adults, and they're not. We are the ones that are supposed to be making the good decisions for these kids. Do you think that my parents just allowed me to run amok and do whatever I wanted to do and read whatever I wanted to read when I was a child? No, I can certainly do that now because I'm 44 years old. But I also have this ability to discern, you know, material that I read, and whether or not I think it's appropriate. I can, if it's disgusting to me, then I'm going to put it away, or I can kind of just take it for the context that it is. But children don't have the ability to do that. And trying to make them out to be that way is, in my opinion, it's wrong. We don't need to be doing that to them. They shouldn't have to try to make these kind of decisions as adults because they're not. Their brains are not even fully developed yet.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And this is, this is eroding their boundaries and robbing them of their innocence and hardening them. I mean, look, you know, here by Raleigh, we've got a 17-year-old that's been charged with first-degree murder of a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old. And then we've got another, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, if you can follow, killed 2 other 16-year-olds. You've got, I mean, we've got, you know, as a society, now you're seeing what's happening when you are, you know, creating this hostile environment. It happens when you racialize and you steal away the innocence by sexualization and other things of children. Does it happen in the home? Yes. And we have laws against that. But it seems like the wild, wild west in certain school districts, certain, not all, not most, luckily a minority, but I'm telling you right now, what you already know, and I know that you know that because you're taking the bull by the horns. If we let this go and the buck stops nowhere, then it's going to be the wild, wild west everywhere.
Right. And that's truly my fear with all of this, is that if we are made aware of this information, I am not doing my job as a school board member. I am not doing my job as a parent. I mean, I have children in our school system as well. And so more than anything, I want to make sure that these kids are protected as a mom. And so I'm not doing my job if I am just allowing material to exist and not vetting it properly and making sure that, you know, the content is also important versus the context of how it's used in the book. And again, that's one of the things that I hear a lot. Well, you have to look at the whole context of the book. No, I don't have to look at the whole context of the book. My question to these authors is, why do you feel it necessary to put this in the book? If you want to write books that are geared towards children that are in school, that are under the age of 18, how about just leave the filth out? I mean, it's not necessary in the book to be able to get your message out or to be able to get your story out. And so maybe you need to think a little bit more about who your audience is going to be or who you want your audience to be. But then also don't get upset, you know, when this book is in the school system and you did choose to put this kind of material in your book. Don't get upset that we say, look, this is not appropriate for our school system. It's not appropriate for these young kids. We are not going to put this kind of content that is, you know, available to just anyone. I mean, that would be very unresponsible of us to do as board members.
And that, well, they know exactly what they're doing, but so do you. So that's good. That's why we need you back on the board. That's why we need you elected. Look, EFA has fully endorsed you in Cabarrus County. We've endorsed actually just a handful of folks that are running as incumbents to sit on the board. We need strong leadership on the board. We've had your lawyer on, Jonathan Vogel, who is the Cabarrus County lawyer, who speaks very highly of your leadership. And look, leadership, that's the key. Parents are sick and tired of conservative school board members even saying, hey, I'm one of 9. What kind of power do I have? You just showed us. You in your capacity, you just did something that was so bold. I just love it. And you showed how leadership was done. So tell everybody how they can donate to your campaign, how they can get involved, boots on the ground.
Well, so obviously we have early voting coming up here shortly here towards the end of October. If you can reach out to me, I do have my Facebook page. Also, my email address is lwblackwell78@gmail.com. If you are interested in donating to my campaign, please reach out to me. You know, again, this truly has been, since 2018, I have been grassroots. I truly have been the boots on the ground type of candidate and type of board member. Many times I have taken myself or realized that I need to take a stand. Even sometimes when it's not the popular thing to do, or, you know, I don't have a lot of support, but I do know that it's the right thing to do. And I think that, to your point with leadership, that's one of the things that's so vital in leadership. It's not about necessarily going with the status quo. It's about taking a stand in what you believe is the right thing for our children, and then, you know, just going with it and being able to stand firm. And, you know, politics is definitely, it is a very ugly and dirty place. And I think that we have all found that out. I think some of these candidates that are running now that have never run for office before are starting to see how ugly politics can be. You have to have a thick skin to be part of this. And I just encourage everyone, if you want strong leadership, if you want someone who is going to stand strong on morals and values and all of the things that you hold dear in your family, then I would just really encourage you to vote for me to be reelected to the Cabarrus County School Board. And I will fight for you, and I will fight for your rights, and I will fight for your children.
Yes, and for us, it's all about judgment. It's easy to talk a good game and say, I would do this, I would do that. They didn't do that right. They didn't do that right. It's about judgment. Politics is mostly about judgment. And look over the span of time that somebody has been doing whatever they've been doing. Do they have the right judgment? It's not about making mistakes or whatever. It's all about, when the time came to make a decision, you show discernment and judgment in doing that. You've always done that. And so we are enthusiastically backing you, and would encourage everyone else to do so. And thank you very much for standing up and for making such a great example of North Carolina, you know, on the national front as well. And we look forward to getting the show on the road and having a vote very soon.
Well, thank you, Sloan. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Well, have a good evening. Bye.
All right. You too.